You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. It's brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN, everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. DBS Industries, we truly are your roof expert. CBG, we stand with you. Fabrimental, your partner in steel. Duroplast, where Duroplast goes, water flows. The Barstow School, start here, go everywhere. Rehoboth Properties, quality housing for all. So you know, the E-Levy has become almost like an albatross around the place. I don't know whose neck it is on. So let's look at it again. It does appear, people suggest that the government is being slow now, but it's a calculative, slowness, deliberate, to be able to gain certain, ground before it puts it up in Parliament to be able to avoid what is threatened. Joining us this morning for this segment, Felix Ofosu-Kwakye is former Deputy Communications Minister and Special Aide to President Mahama. Andrew Ejapamesa is Deputy Minister, Energy Ministry. And Godfred Bokwin is Professor of Economics, University of Ghana. Bright Simmons, Vice President, Imani Africa. Now, whilst because of we're just waking up to the Moody's downgrade and other matters where the World Bank is also saying a few things, and we are getting to know the quantum of money that has come through the IMF and the World Bank to our country for the fight of COVID-19, which is blamed for all the problems. I want to do it this way. Let me speak to these two politicians briefly before I go to Godfred, Bryce Simmons and Godfred. So, Mr. Mensah, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Great.
Happy New Year.
Yes, so you were at the forum and you were doing everything to convince the people that we needed the E-Levy. Do you realize how difficult it's becoming for you to convince people about this? Or you see it differently?
Well, let me say good morning to my colleague panelists and to your cherished viewers and listeners. I don't think that it's been difficult to convince people at all. I'm sure that you followed the processes and events that preceded the laying of the budget and events thereafter. There was a lot of misinformation that was thrown out there. And so it's important that government ordinarily would have gone out after the approval and the passage of the law to engage stakeholders before implementation. But we still have had to go nonetheless at this point because of the misinformation and the propaganda, mainly to, as it were, try and get people to appreciate the facts, the issues that confront us as a nation, and to solicit their support to enable us to proceed. In your intro, you indicated that we tend to indicate that COVID-19 is to be blamed for all our woes. I don't think that that is the case at all. We have consistently maintained that the financial sector cleanup cost that was incurred, the energy sector payments that were incurred were all funded through debt. Unfortunately, COVID-19 hit, and that has compounded the issues that confront us. So it cannot be the case that government is attributing the situation that we find ourselves in today only to COVID-19. We gave some background underlying issues that were confronting the economy before COVID-19 also hit. So I think that's important that we put it in proper perspective so we are all clear with what it is that we are talking about.
Are you scared you get it thrown out of Parliament and that's why you have been slow in putting it up?
Not at all. Of course, I mean, every policy that you roll out, depending on the reception or the way and manner with which it is twisted within the political fray, you ought to strategize and to then solicit the support of the greater majority of the people. I do not expect unanimity at all, because our friends on the other side have indicated quite clearly their opposition to the bill. I do not expect them, of course, if they come around and see eye to eye with government and appreciate the challenge that we face today, some of which can be attributed directly to their mismanagement of our economy, okay, then we can together as a nation find a way to raise the requisite revenue, cut expenditure, and do all the things that we know when we go to IMF we asked to do. And so I think that we ordinarily should be able to pass the bill, but government took the position that let's engage, okay, and try and bring as many people as we can.
So presently you are speaking to people, you are explaining to people, not consulting them, right?
Of course, it is through the engagement that the Ministry of Finance has signaled a reduction of the rate from 1.75 to 1.50. And so we are explaining and also listening, taking feedback, and responding to same as appropriate.
Yeah, we were told before that you had consulted extensively, you had done an extensive survey, and the results were positive. Now, general surveys done by almost any media house, any entity, brings a result that is contrary to what government wants people to believe. You don't think so?
Well, I disagree, of course. I've seen some survey unscientific that has been put out by several media platforms, okay? And largely because of the spin and, of course, the misinformation, the downright falsehood that was attributed to the incidence of the imposition of the E-Levy. That then shaped public opinion in a certain direction. But increasingly, as we go along and engage people, and people appreciate that, after all, what it is that we are talking about is 1 cedi 50 pesos, okay, levy on every 100 above the threshold that has been exempted. That is really what it comes down to. People tend to wonder that, oh, so really, is that what this is all about? Obviously, if you look at the tax net, and several people who are in the informal sector, okay, who then don't contribute to paying their portion of our development expenditure, would be brought in, and people appreciate that. Well, you and I who are in the formal sector get to pay direct taxes. But how about the masons? How about the carpenters? How about the people who sell by the roadside, who also earn significant income but do not pay any contribution? This levy, obviously not an end in itself, okay, because you would realize the government has consistently started a process of formalizing the economy through the digitalization agenda. But that process is not complete. Now we are confronted with a situation where we cannot continue to fund the deficit, okay, or the gap between our expenditure and our revenue through debt. And so government is embarking on this measure as another revenue handle to raise some additional funding, just so that we cannot go to the IMF, if you like.
Why are you completely against and rejecting the other sources of generating income, which actually politically some of your members say will not hurt you politically, because you don't need to take from all Ghanaians, so to speak? The extractive industry has been suggested that you could get in excess of, is it $20 billion US from.
I don't think that is mutually exclusive at all. Of course, all those suggestions that are being put across require some work to be done to enable you bring all those revenues, assuming that it is true that there are leakages in that sector, into the tax bracket and into the consolidated fund.
Okay.
That process can still take place. Of course, the digitalization agenda that is looking ultimately to broaden the tax net is still ongoing. but government still has to fund the budget as approved by Parliament. And so it's important that the immediate, and people call it low-hanging fruits. I agree, of course. Everybody always make suggestions to the effect that tackle the low-hanging fruits before you can go on to do other measures that then will bring you additional revenue.
Okay.
So if we all agree that financial inclusion is good and that many people are using that platform to transact business, but then they proceed to say that that financial inclusion ought not go with some contribution from the users of that platform.
All right.
Then
now,
I have a little difficulty. I think that this is
let me hear. Let's hear from the NDC. Let's hear from the NDC why they are also opposed completely, even to whatever reductions that may be proposed, because initially it was 1.75. Now the minister says 1.5. And the NDC says a complete no. You guys have suggested, and Imani has also suggested, things like cutting down the size of government. Whilst they are asking us to sort of tighten our belts, there are no signs that anything is being done on the side of government. And of course, this is the historic bloated government. We had in excess of 116 or plus ministers. And the president has, if you like, beat his own by reducing, but not beyond 100. Imani insists that you can deal with only 50. A V8 cost about $140,000 US, right? So if you had all of that money, that's a lot of savings. So why at all don't you want to hear a reduction? Nothing. You just want zero E-Levy.
Samson, the truth of the matter is that this government wants an easy way out. They do not want to do the things that will sustainably ensure that we get out of the hole that they have plunged us in. Now, it is important to stress that the Ghanaian economy currently is hanging by a thread, and it is no exaggeration to say that it has already collapsed, because at the moment we are only going through the motions. This government is unable to do anything because of the hole that they themselves dug and have plunged us in. You see, as I speak to you, and you can verify this with the IMF, the rating agencies, and everybody else who has run commentary on the Ghanaian economy, the two things that have undermined this economy are an unsustainable debt overhang and a large budget deficit, both of which result from the decisions of this government. When we were young, it was laughable to hear Ejapa claim that they are suffering from the aftershocks of our so-called mismanagement of the economy. Now, on these two parameters, when we left office, our budget deficit was 6.1% of GDP. Our debt to GDP ratio was 56%. The total debt was 120 billion. What are the parameters today? Indeed, I have seen the December debt figures. It is 350 billion Ghana cedis. In fact, if you add some of the debt that they are hiding in state-owned agencies and very dodgy special purpose vehicles like ESLA, Dachi Bond, Sino Hydro, and what have you, our public debt should be 362 billion Ghana cedis. Our debt to GDP ratio, if you do central government accounting, should be 83% of GDP. Now, on what basis can anybody compare these two scenarios and say that what is happening today is a result of what happened yesterday? What simply happened is that this government believed that it needed to win elections at all costs. And so in 2020, they spent far beyond what we were capable of financing. And that is why they had a huge deficit of 15.2%. That is what has undermined us to this day. Now, because of this, we are having to use almost all of our revenue to do just three things. Debt servicing. This year, it will be 46 billion Ghana cedis. When you take that out and you take compensation of public workers, 37 billion Ghana cedis. And then statutory payments, which are rigid, that government cannot do anything about, 26 billion. You have 109 billion, which swallows up the entire 100.5 billion Ghana cedis that this government says it will realize this year, according to its own projections. Because of that, they don't have anything left to finance critical expenditure. As I speak to you, for 2 years, Basic schools have not been given textbooks. Capitation grants have been in arrears for 4 tranches. Even the much vaunted free SHS is underfunded. And you notice that on the eve of Christmas, Charles issued a threat that if government does not make good its commitments, it will be compelled to close the schools and send the children home. Teacher trainees spent only 3 months out of 12 months last year in school because government could not find money to give them to run the schools. The District Assembly Commons Fund has been in arrears for 4 tranches, which is for 4 quarters, which is 1 year. Contractors are owed in excess of 20 billion Ghana cedis. Government cannot pay. Even NAPCO graduates have to endure a bitter Christmas because they are owed several months arrears. Teacher trainee and nursing trainee allowances are owed several months arrears. Lecturers are demanding pay increases that government cannot meet. The universities are not able to expand. So now there's a crisis in terms of accommodation. Now, this is reminiscent of a collapsed economy because there's a cash crunch which is self-inflicted. Now, the E-Levy, which this government touts as the panacea to all our problems, is completely irrelevant as far as resolving the crisis we are in at the moment is. Now, let me tell you something from the budget. If you read...
We are funding a budget of 100 million.
Yes.
100.
No, our budget is actually 137 billion.
137.
Yes.
And E-Levy is supposed to give us only 6 billion.
You see, government creates the impression that once the E-Levy is passed, they will substantially plug the hole and they will need something little in order to be able to finance our development. That is not
I
true.
drew your attention to that because you said the E-Levy is to solve everything.
That's what they are saying. But you see, what has actually happened now, the crisis we are in, is that this government does not have policy credibility. So investors do not want to touch us. In fact, they don't want to even lend us rotten nails or rusted nails in terms of financing or lending because they don't trust government's own projections. They don't trust that this government has managed the economy prudently. They don't trust that if they lend us money, we will be in any position to service it regularly as we should. And therefore, they are hedging. They have raised their yields or interest so that it is not sustainable for us to borrow. So we don't have access to the market. Now, the E-Levy has been touted as the panacea to this problem. But you see something? Look at Appendix 232 and 233 of the 2022 budget. You see, government says that its financing for 2022, which is borrowing, will be 37 billion Ghana cedis. By 2025, this will go to around 29 billion Ghana cedis, which means that even with the E-Levy, government will still be borrowing. Now, let me draw your attention to the foreign component, what they call the Euro bonds, green bonds, term bonds, and others. Now, this year, government projects that it will borrow 4.8 billion in terms of external international bond market operations. By 2025, it will go to 15 billion Ghana cedis. Now, domestically, they will borrow 28 billion this year. By 2025, they will borrow 29 billion Ghana cedis. So, government has programmed to borrow more, even as they collect the E-Levy. So, the E-Levy will not resolve the problem. The problem that investors have with us is that they think that our operations, in terms of our fiscal operations, are not sustainable. There are rigidities that this government cannot overcome. And that is where the issue arises about the need for this government to cut expenditure. The Office of Government Machinery is receiving about 3.2 billion Ghana cedis. Over 500 billion Ghana cedis more, 500 million Ghana cedis more than they received last year. As I speak to you, our president likes to sit in the $14,000 an hour rented jet at a time when we have a presidential jet that is fit for purpose. How can you live like an Arabian king? You are neck deep in ostentation. You will not listen to cries and pleas from the people of Ghana to cut down on this expenditure. And you want them to pay E-Levy, which essentially will be taxing people's savings and their capital. Because somebody goes to buy items from the market. The item he is going to buy already has VAT and other taxes inbuilt. Simply because he opts to pay electronically, you say he should pay additional taxation. Why? This government goes about claiming that it hated taxes in opposition. Meanwhile, since they've been in power, they've introduced over 23 different tax handles. People have endured this. There were no complaints. But people say that this E-Levy is the last straw that has broken the camel's back. And you see, we are in deep crisis. That is why the rating agencies have downgraded us. If you read the commentary that follows Fitch's downgrade, and let me stress that Fitch has downgraded us. Yesterday, there was some propaganda by some MPP.
Yesterday was Moody's.
I'm saying that Fitch has downgraded us to B-. our long-term credit rating is B- with a negative outlook. Some people claim that it was corrected. It is not true. It is on their website.
Moody's is with a positive outlook.
No, yes, but they've downgraded us to CAA1.
That's right.
Which, if you look at their scale, is very high credit risk. It is only 2 steps away from the lowest.
Right. They explain that.
And this is the worst that we've seen. But you see, there's something. Yes, there's something I need to draw your attention to. You see,
30 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah.
The investor community does not have confidence in us. Because as I speak to you, there's already indication that we are beginning to default on some of our loans. Yesterday, I stumbled on information which shows that in 2020 and 2021, we paid 10 million Ghana cedis in punitive interest because we defaulted on some loans that we took. So this government is so tight that they don't know what to do. But instead of cutting expenditure and living within our means, they decide that they will foist pain and suffering on us for their own mismanagement of the economy.
Thank you. Now, let me go to Bright Simmons. And Bright, I've read your article, Ghana, a nation of tax thieves. Very, very interesting. And the statistics you share there on the continent about the tax reluctance and the smaller numbers of people who pay tax and the rest of them. What do you say is the way to go other than E-Levy? Because we have heard you make a brilliant presentation to us on this show about how to turn the economy around.
Good morning, Samson. There is a slight production glitch in that I was told that what I'm supposed to talk about is whether or not IMF is an alternative to the E-Levy.
It's part of the discussion. It's part of the discussion.
So am I allowed to proceed on that?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I apologize that I have a presentation, but that was what the producer asked me to do. And in respect of that, the easy question is, what is it that we are looking to use E-Levy for? The second issue is whether or not the government thinks this is temporary and is due entirely to COVID, or it's a structural problem. In answering one of both questions, the issue of whether or not IMF is a potential alternative is easier and more addressed. So first of all, we do have fiscal holes, and it's not just one hole. I think Mr. Fosu has made it very clear that it's not just a simple, small piece of the situation that we need to fill. We have a much more comprehensive challenge. And he's already pointed out that you need revenue about 137 billion. The government is already increasing taxes from 57 billion to 100 billion. So it's not as if E-Levy is the only tax raise. They're trying to increase tax by 43% already. And then they want to borrow, in addition, about 30 billion besides E-Levy. And E-Levy is an extra 7 billion. So in some ways, E-Levy is just one small part of the discussion. We also know that even if the government doesn't borrow externally, it intends to borrow significantly locally. And we have situations where the chart you are looking at on your top left hand is Cocoa Board's borrowing since 2011. You can see that it's grown from less than 1 billion Ghana cedis to 12 billion Ghana cedis last year. That's domestic borrowing. Typically, Cocoa Board borrows externally, but it's struggling to raise as much as it needs, and it's growing more and more. So we have a situation where we need money from everywhere we can grab our hands on. It's as simple as that. So in that respect, the question is whether or not IMF is a potential contributor to that. Part of the challenge, obviously, the fiscal debt, which now is back to mid-1970s level when we defaulted on our debt. So we have a very big problem on our hands. The question is, where do you find the money? You can go and borrow commercially. And if you borrow commercially, you can get around about 8%, roughly. Nowadays, given our current circumstances, we'll get more above 10%. But I'm saying that on average, let's say 8%. Or you can go to IMF where either the interest rate is free, or typically you get around 2%. And if you stay within your quota, normally you are giving maybe 185% above your quota or 200% above your quota. They have a certain way they determine the maximum you can borrow. It's only if you borrow above that maximum that you get surcharges. But even the surcharges will not take you to more than 4%, 3.5% thereabout. So in simple terms, IMF money is cheaper if all you are looking to do is to plug some of the 30-something billion hole that you have. That point is also that IMF doesn't charge the fees that will pay to all manner of investment banking actors in Europe and America, particularly in Europe, if we are doing a Euro bond, we pay millions of dollars in fees, from legal advisors to lead managers to rating agencies, etc. And of course, there are people in this country who have relationships there, and therefore, anytime we borrow, those relationships benefit. But obviously, we have to think of national interest. There's that point as well in terms of the cost of raising money on the commercial market. If the issue is rather that E-Levy is just going to help the government project to investors that it's got fiscal consolidation under control and therefore be able to borrow at a better rate, that's a different debate. So that's not only talking about how we find money from anywhere to plug different sources, because what the government is looking to do is improve its credit rating. Well, the IMF doesn't have just one product. Its standard basic products, the conventional products, are about 10 of them. If you look at the top there, you see those that come primarily to assist countries that need quick adjustment. You find a group that we tend to qualify for, the EFF and the ECF, which usually is when you have protracted problems. And you have those where if you have an acute sudden problem and you just want some quick money, you go for the RFI and the RCF. We have already gone for the RCF. In fact, not only have we gone for the RCF, when the IMF then decided to increase quotas so that anybody in the world at all can also go get more money, we went there to get more money as well. So in short, there are different ways of borrowing from the IMF, not all of which come with conditionality. The RCF that we got last 2 years, for instance, didn't come with any conditionality. The quota disbursement that we got last year did not come with any conditionalities at all. Typically, if you get an RFI, the conditions are either non-existent or very minimal. And then you have some IMF products which are for countries that are performing very well, but need some overdraft. And tends to be countries with strong economies, and they borrow large amounts. Mexico borrowed about $50 billion of that, Chile about $27 billion out of that facility. And if it's those ones, then if we think our economy is really strong and this is just a temporary blip, then we can go for the FCL or the PLL. And those also have no conditions. The other point is also that when you borrow from the IMF, typically your commercial rates go down. So the concern that if we go for IMF money, we are then blocked from borrowing externally. It's not true. These are countries that took the FCL from the IMF, and you can see the effect that is had on their borrowing, sometimes to as much as about 1% of commercial borrowing because of the signal that the IMF sends to international investors. We can see the situation in Ghana in 2015, where because of Junso and other factors, we were going back to the IMF, we're going back to the international markets, and we're being asked to pay more than 10.75%. Then we went on an IMF program, and we managed to drop the cost of borrowing. Secondly, it also depends on how you negotiate. When you look at the countries that have borrowed during the COVID crisis, and you look at those that got money without condition, you can see that in some respects, most countries are able to get facilities without conditions if they negotiate strongly and effectively. The other thing is also that to get the more quality IMF products, your economy has to be in good shape. The FCL and the others, they don't give it to countries that are basket cases. So if you go to IMF, you are getting a bad deal. It's often because your economy is really bad. So they are giving you the EFF or the ECF and things like that. There are also countries where we've seen instances because of the epidemic, they've created a new product like the catastrophic containment, but that is for typically very poor countries. And we may not qualify for that. So part of the big challenge is, what do you qualify for?
Okay.
So is this all just jargon? No. We have countries that have borrowed a significant amount of money from the IMF without conditionality, using the right product. The RFI, for instance, Egypt got 2.7 billion. Egypt got 2.7 billion. South Africa got about 3.3 billion. None of that was based on any conditionality. And if you look at Kenya's borrowing costs, because of the fact that they still use concessional funding, which is not commercial funding, they get from the IMF, World Bank, and bilateral partners. Right. You can see that they've been able to drop how much they spend quite significantly. Right. Last point. We've always gone to the IMF many times. So this is not a solution to any structural problem. We've already gone to IMF about 16 times in our history. It has not changed the fundamentals of the economy. More importantly, based on the E-Levy is that because we have a tax net that is extremely narrow, that is why we need to aggressively increase taxation, even though we already increased taxation by 43%. What this chart shows you is that Ghana actually has more taxpayers given the size of its economy and the size of its population, than many of the countries we compare ourselves to, from Brazil, Kenya, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. The IMF has already provided $2 billion in the last 2 years, so an extra $1 billion from E-Levy is not going to make much the difference. Sorry, I had to rush through, but that was the preparation I was told to make. Thank you.
Right. So from where you sit, we don't really have to be thinking about going. The government doesn't think it is necessary. The monies that have come in support of COVID prevention or COVID management, as you said, IMF has given a total of 2 billion, and then the World Bank has also given a certain amount, bringing the total, as I understand, to about, is it 15 billion Ghana cedis?
Samson, I'm not sure I understood your question. Are you saying that we've already got significant money from these multilateral bodies?
To sort of help our reserves.
Yes, I mean, that's the point I was making, that when we talk about the IMF issue, it's a bit, funny, because just over the last 2 years, we borrowed about 2 billion from them, right? None of them came with any conditions.
All right.
So when you hear consistently people talk about the fact that getting you out of an IMF program, it's an achievement. I'm trying to explain that there are different types of IMF programs. So we have to be clear which ones we are talking about, in order for you to make the analysis whether or not you want to go to IMF or not. But more important point is that IMF is not a solution, even how much money we are looking to raise. Okay. And E-Levy is not a solution also, because we have such a big hole and we have more structural problems. That's basically the summary of my analysis.
Thank you very much, Bright Simmons. Thank you for joining us. Now, let me go to Professor Bokping. Prof, you have been very categorical in suggesting that we don't need this E-Levy in the first place, and that the economy is in trouble. So how do we support? As we hear from the finance minister, it happens everywhere. In times of need, the nation must be mobilized to help. Burden share.
Good morning, Samson, and good morning to cherished listeners and viewers, and good morning to other panelists on this show. I subscribe fully to Bryce Simmons' presentation. It's quite solid and sound. I think, is there anything else to say that this E-Levy is not the way to go? Just after the government presented the budget, we're told that there had been extensive consultation and they had a buy-in of Ghanaians. You see, this is what we say: if you don't understand, if you don't do your policy formulation well, bearing in mind the reality and all of that, you run into some kind of lack of policy credibility. And then hurriedly, you told investors that you will get the E-Levy passed at 1.75%. Now you have signaled to the market that you're going to withdraw this and bring it back at 1.5%. Fine. If they bring it to 0.5%, which perhaps we can forgive, I still don't think that is the way to go. And I'm sure you ask me that we have a problem. Is it the case that we just want the government to fail, and that's why we are preventing or saying E-Levy is not the way to go? No, nobody loves this country more than we do. We love this republic. But I'll tell you where the solutions are, Samson. I want us to go to the 2019 State of the Nation address given by our own president. In that State of the Nation address, the president told us that the biggest threat to our domestic revenue mobilization strategy is exemptions. Samson, this was our own president. And I want to believe that this was born out of a rigorous analysis. And the president, to make matters serious for all of us, told us that if we don't do anything about it, if we continue at this rate, in less than 16 years, Ghana will give more than half of our revenue base away by way of exemptions. Samson, if you have a state, a government that came to this conclusion, and that government said that they had sent an exemption bill to Parliament to deal with it, and we are talking about 3 years or so, and nothing has happened about this. Look, in that State of the Nation address, the president told us that in 2018, we lost 4.66 billion Ghana cedis to just an aspect of exemptions, which has to do with import duty, import VAT, and all of that, excluding other exemptions. We are talking about 4.66 billion cedis. Per our own estimation, and an estimate exists across several think tanks, that we are losing annually more than $2.27 billion. And something, if you don't want to do anything about this, and your proposal is as though a salvation is an E-Levy, is most unfortunate. E-Levy is problematic on principle basis, and it's also problematic in terms of implementation. It defeats certain principles of taxation that is supposed to be an enabler to growth. Right now, look, something, and we don't hate this government. You know something? I believe that we have been more passionate with this government than probably Mohammed's government. Since COVID came, government has introduced sanitation levy. I'm sure you are aware.
That's right.
We let go. We have introduced COVID levy. All of that. In fact, we altered the VAT arrangement to some flat levies with no option of recoveries. If you put all those levies together, and together with COVID, sanitation, and all of that, please, is there not a limit? Is there not a threshold where you want to put the brake on taxation? Is it not contradictory to think that we can tax ourselves into wealth creation? This is look, you know, if you look at the consumption-based taxes and all of that, and if you add E-Levy, it's counterproductive. And I'll tell you where I have a problem with this. We've been talking about the fourth industrial revolution predicated on network readiness and all of that. So now we are talking about a digital economy. Globally, the digital economy, even in 2016, was predicted to be worth over $11 trillion. The digital economy in Africa is worth over $300 billion by 2025. In fact, COVID has fast-tracked it and expanded it.
Right.
So the future is actually in the digital economy. So if you impose E-Levy, which is to target one direction relative to the traditional economy that is cash-based, then that tells you that probably we are ignorant of where the world is heading towards.
Thank you, but sorry, I gave almost everybody some 7 minutes, and I'm cutting you at 6 minutes. In the next 2 minutes, Felix and Ejapamesa, starting with you, the issue about tax exemptions, we are told that we lose over $5 billion annually through tax exemptions. Is this one area the government is looking at, for example, to do something?
Samson, my understanding is that sometime in 2019, an exemptions bill was laid in Parliament. Obviously, the life of that Parliament died at the end of 2020, I believe, since January, without it passed. And so if government intends, and of course, if it presented a bill in the past, then every indication is that they intend to implement some reform in that space. And so I would expect that the Finance Ministry would resubmit that bill so that we can deal with it. But you see, some of the statements that is made, okay, that seems to paint some doomsday scenario. It's a little worrying because it cannot be the case that somebody is saying that E-Levy is going to be the panacea to our government. Indeed, when you look at the
finance minister, the finance minister doesn't say E-Levy is the be-it-all and all. But some of your communicators, unfortunately, they are saying everything else. If you don't do E-Levy, we can't have free SHS and the rest of them. So, Ejapamesa, thank you very much.
Those expenditure items were not even included in the memorandum that was attached to the bill.
That's right.
And
thank you.
We need to look at the document as
I'm sorry, but we have run out. 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. Is the NDC organizing a demonstration, fix the country, all of you?
Well, our youth wing is organizing a demonstration. I'm sure in the coming days, they'll put out more information. But this government has had 400 billion Ghana cedis in the last 6 years. The reason why we are in this hole is that they have mismanaged those resources. They have put us in a position where those who do business with that don't want to mind us. Look, it is not only those who lend us money who will be worried. Multilateral and bilateral agencies, the World Bank, IMF, AFDB, countries that lend us money, give us grants, would also be pulling their support because they don't trust the mismanagement that is going on.
I'm sorry, but we have run out of time. Thank you very much, all of you. I understand that the exemptions bill, is it back in Parliament or so? Habil Scooter is the one responsible for my outfit. Habil Scooter at Adringano Gates, East Legon. You can call them 0200 84 1988. I'm Samson Ladi Ayenini. Thank you very much. And my guests for the very final segment of the show have been Felix Kwache Ofosu, and Ejapa Mesa, Bright Simmons, and also Professor Bokping. Thank you also very much.